Family, peace, peace, peace to the family, peace to the lineage. Yes, sir. You are now tuning in to Unbiased Ron, also known as FBA Ron. This is my channel, FBA News and Updates. Yeah, and now we're gonna drop some heavy, heavy information on Marcus Garvey, like you never seen before and never heard before. You dig? You know what I'm saying? It's gonna be some moments where you'll be like, yeah, I heard that before. And there'll be moments where you're gonna be like, wow, I've never heard that before. Okay, so before I touch on Garvey, I think it's important to touch on the KKK because Garvey involves himself with the KKK at some point of his movement. He joins the KKK. So let me explain who the KKK are, was, and why that was a big deal for them to do that amongst FBA Black activists. FBA stands for Foundation of Black Americans. So I'm saying Black American activists of the time, 1920. Why were they up in outrage when Marcus Garvey met with the Klan? When you learn about their bloody history and their terrorism towards Black Americans, you'll understand why after he made that move, they decided to start the Garvey Must Go campaign and get him up out of here. All right, so family, the KKK, known as the Ku Klux Klan, was not just a social club that turned violent, as some would try to act like it that was the case. No, it was like the Proud Boys of one of these groups today, these violent groups today. It was a paramilitary organization designed to use domestic terrorism to reverse the results of the Civil War, right? They wanted to end Black freedom, Black liberty. Its primary goal was to destroy the political power of newly freed Black Americans and our white elites or white allies correction, and reestablish a system of white supremacy. So they wanted to reestablish white supremacy. They didn't want white supremacy to go away. The KKK was founded in late 1865 in Pulaski, Tennessee, by 6 Confederate veterans. Initially, they claimed it was a secret social fraternity, but it rapidly evolved into a violent insurgent movement. Their goal was simple in their minds. Simple people have simple goals: to overthrow the Reconstruction governments in the South and prevent Black people, Foundation Black Americans, from voting, owning land, or exercising our new rights as citizens. Confederate General Nathan Bedford Forrest became the first Grand Wizard. Under his leadership, the Klan became a decentralized network of dens, DENS, that used hoods and robes to hide their identities while carrying out night raids, looking like Casper the Friendly Ghost. They used extrajudicial violence, lynchings, house burnings, and public beatings to ensure that the social order of the Old South remained intact despite the legal end of slavery. Burning down our homes. It was against home ownership, Black home ownership, as white supremacy, systemic racism is today and historically. Let's talk about the Opelousas massacre in 1868. This is one of the deadliest yet often overlooked events in American history. It occurred in St. Landry Parish, Louisiana, just before the presidential election. Black citizens, FBAs, were organizing to vote for the Republican Party, the Lincoln Party, of course. A white school teacher and newspaper editor, Emerson Bentley, wrote an article encouraging Black people to vote, which enraged local white supremacists, specifically the Seymour Knights, a group linked to the Klan. All right. After Bentley was attacked, Black citizens armed themselves for protection. White mobs, including the KKK, used this as an excuse to launch a massive cleansing of the parish. Historians estimate that between 200 and 300 black people were murdered. Okay. Over several weeks, bodies were buried in woods or thrown in the swamps.
Oh my God.
The massacre was successful in its goal. In the following election, not a single Republican vote was cast in St. Landry Parish. So the KKK was all about terrorizing Black Americans and trying to get us from not voting. Okay. Let's talk about the Red Summer 1919.
Bruh.
The term Red Summer refers to a series of more than 30 race riots and massacres that broke out across the U.S. following World War I. Black veterans were returning home from war demanding the democracy that they had fought for in Europe. Meanwhile, the Great Migration had brought thousands of Black families to northern cities, creating competition for jobs and housing. Okay. This era saw the second KKK, which was now a nationwide organization of members, including police officers and politicians. Chicago, a 13-day riot triggered by the drowning of a Black teenager.
Oh my God.
Eugene Williams, after he drifted into a white-only section of a beach. Washington, D.C., white mobs, including many servicemen, attacked Black neighborhoods for 4 days until Black residents fought back. Yeah, we fought back. In Arkansas, perhaps the deadliest part of Red Summer, where hundreds of Black sharecroppers were killed by white mobs and federal troops after trying to organize a union, just trying to organize a union.
Oh my God.
Federal troops as well was taking part in that massacre. Okay, so the KKK and their copycat white supremacist mobs were responsible for several ethnic cleansings of prosperous Black communities. Damn shame, man. All right, so let's look at the Ocoee massacre in 1920. On election day in Florida, the KKK led a mob that burned the Black community of Ocoee to the ground because Black citizens attempted to vote. All because we attempted to vote.
Bruh.
A year later, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, it's called the Tulsa Race Massacre in 1921. The destruction of the wealthy Black Wall Street in Oklahoma, while not necessarily or exclusively a KKK event, many Klan members participated in the aerial bombing, aerial airplanes. Okay. They participated in the aerial bombings and ground attacks that left up to 300 dead. And then 1923, you got what's called the Rosewood Massacre. A prosperous Black town in Florida was completely burned to the ground and its residents hunted through the woods after a white woman falsely accused a Black man of assault. Yep, that's it. Okay. So the KKK's success in the early 20th century relied on three pillars: voting suppression. If you can't vote, you can't change the laws. Economic sabotage, destroying Black-owned businesses, like in Tulsa, to prevent Black wealth. Physical terror, using lynching as a public spectacle to keep the community in a state of constant fear. Okay, so these events are classified today by historians as genocidal acts or ethnic cleansing. They were not random. They were not random riots, but coordinated efforts to disrupt the lineage and wealth building of foundational Black Americans.
Easy.
Okay, so now we know the deadly past of the Klan and how they terrorized and attacked us violently. Why would Marcus Garvey ever, ever, ever join them.
Wait a minute. Who are you?
Right. He is known as Marcus Garvey. He met with the leaders of the Ku Klux Klan in 1922. Yep.
Oh my God.
While the exact details of their discussions remain somewhat unclear, it's generally understood that the meaning stemmed from their shared, albeit vastly different, beliefs in racial segregation. Garvey, a proponent of, you could say, African nationalism, Negro nationalism, advocated for the separation of Black people from white society and the establishment of an independent Negro nation in Africa, I guess. The KKK, a white supremacist hate group, also supported racial segregation and white racial purity. Though their ideologies were rooted in hate and oppression, both Garvey and the KKK saw segregation as a way to achieve their respective goals. Garvey likely believed that meeting with the KKK, he could gain support for his Back to Africa movement and further his cause of Black self-determination. He knew he had no pulls in, this is me talking, right? He knew he had no pulls in Liberia to get Black people a colony in Liberia. So he looked at the KKK as the ACS, the American Colony Society. So he seen them as uh, somehow pulling strings to get Black Americans resettled, repatriated in Africa.
No, 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 no.
Yeah. So that's why he went to them. Well, that's one of the reasons why he went to them. But he was also glazing them. He was praising them. And when our Black leaders, our activists at the time, got wind of Marcus Garvey meeting with our bloody, deadly ops, they said, I said, the gloves are off. He got to go. He got to go. He got to go. He got to go. Okay, it's very taboo to meet with the Klan. Now, who would meet with the Klan today? You dig? Anyway, I mean, damn, if you took a picture with Donald Trump, you would be excommunicated. Right? That's how sensitive we are towards racism and racists. There is information available that suggests Marcus Garvey was under surveillance by the Bureau of Investigation. Okay, that was the forerunner of the FBI. There are sources. There are sources that that mention a Black American FBI agent, James Wormley Jones, okay, who infiltrated Garvey's Universal Negro Improvement Association, UNIA. Jones' role was to gather intelligence on Garvey and his organization. Gather intelligence, not plant intelligence. He was not um, Mark Furman. Okay. He didn't sabotage or set up Garvey. He was there to extract and gather intelligence on Garvey and his organization, particularly looking for evidence of subversive activities or any violations of the law, because rumor had it that the dude was scamming. Okay. This information was used in the case against Garvey, which eventually led to his conviction and deportation. Goodbye. All right. So let's look at it. Let's look at his mail fraud case that he was convicted of. So Garvey's shipping company, the Black Star Line, was in deep financial trouble. To raise money, Garvey began advertising a new ship. Okay. The SS Phyllis Wheatley. To take people to Africa, he eventually published brochures with a photo of a ship that had Phyllis Wheatley painted on the side. The Black Star Line did not own that ship.
No, 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 no.
Yeah, they didn't. They were in negotiations to buy a ship called the SS Orion, but they hadn't finished the deal or paid for it. Yeah. The photo in the brochure was actually a fake. Yep. Fake fake photo.
Oh my
He had
God.
he had experience in printing way back in London, Jamaica. He brought those scamming skills to America. So yeah, the photo in the brochure was actually a fake. The name Phyllis Wheatley had been airbrushed or edited onto the image of a different vessel. That's scamming. Garvey supporters argued this was a technicality. They claimed he was selling stock to get the money to finish the purchase. Okay, well, that's not how the law seen it. The law seen it as a he's misrepresenting an asset to lure investors. Okay, scamming. Okay, so that's one part. What about his his repatriation scam bringing us to Liberia? What about that? So, starting around 1920, Garvey sold Liberian Liberty bonds. Liberty, Liberty. Now, keep in mind, this is 1920. This is during the Red Summer, which started in 1919. So, a lot is going on, family. You got to look at the context. So, starting around 1920, Garvey sold Liberian Liberty bonds and Liberian construction loans, raising hundreds of thousands of dollars from Black Americans. He promised this money would be uh, going towards to build a new colony and transport thousands of people to settle there in Liberia. While Garvey had some initial verbal encouragement from Liberia officials in 1920, he never secured a formal legal treaty or land grant to move thousands of people there. Scammer. Okay. When the Liberian government realized Garvey's movement was radical and might threaten their own power or anger colonial powers like Britain and France, they officially banned the UNIA. Garvey's organization in 1924, uh, right? And then they seized their equipment. The people who had invested their life savings in the dream were left with absolutely nothing. Scam out of their money, man. Their hard working money. So, family, we're not going to play stupid, right? That's scamming. That's scamming. That's scamming. Let's talk about some other stuff. So in modern finance, you cannot sell stocks based on assets you do not own. He did that. He did that. The SS Phileas Wheatley and then the SS Ethiopian trash can ship. He did not own the SS Phileas Wheatley. As a matter of fact, that was not the name. The name was the Orion. Okay, we got to stop. There was no SEC at that time. There was no Securities and Exchange Commission at that time. If it was around, he would have been his business would have been struck down for securities fraud. Family, there's a name for that. When you sell something you don't own in that type of world, in the finance world, it's called selling vaporware. He's taking money from Black Americans for something that he does not own, something that does not exist. That's scamming. Garvey targeted again the most vulnerable Black Americans of society, fearful of this red summer that's occurring. All right. So the working class of Black people who was desperate to escape Jim Crow, guess what? They fell for the dream. All right. So today, that is commonly called affinity fraud. What is affinity fraud? This is when a scammer uses a shared identity, race, Black power. Oh man, uh, a school for Black boys. That is called affinity fraud. You use race, religion, or community to gain trust and then mismanage or steal the money from your supporters. Okay. He took nickels and dimes from the poor for a Liberia plan that had no legal backing. Okay, that is seen as predatory practices. That's a fact. There's no way out of this. Well, modern corporate laws require fiduciary duty. This means a leader must act in the best interest of their investors and be honest about losses. Okay. Garvey famously hid the fact that his first three ships were, in his words, leaky buckets that were losing thousands of dollars. Check this out. Instead, he kept asking for money to expand. Today, family, that is known as a Ponzi style scam using new investment money to cover up old failures. In other words, robbing Peter to pay Paul. Okay. So yeah. Now his supporters will act like, oh no, J. Edgar Hoover set him up, the jury gave him no fair shot. We're gonna challenge that. We are going to challenge that. Let's look at the legal receipts against Marcus Garvey. Okay, let's look at his 1920 let's look at his 1923 mail fraud trial. Okay. Now, while it is historically true that J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI, well, then the BOI, Bureau of Investigation, targeted Marcus Garvey to dismantle the UNIA, that doesn't acquit him of mail fraud and scamming Black people. One thing does not have to do with the other. Let's make that very clear. There's documented business missteps that we're going to look at. Garvey was charged with using the U.S. mail to defraud the public. Garvey was charged with using the U.S. mail to defraud the public in connection with the sale of stock for his shipping company, the Black Star Line, BSL, a BS line. We're not going to ignore the fact that there was a smoking gun. So regardless of J. Edgar Hoover giving him a hard time, the FBI, they surveillance everybody. Anybody of significance, of influence, you're going to be investigated, but that doesn't mean you're a scammer. Don't give them something to go off on. Malcolm X was investigated. Dr. King was investigated. Many people, many Black people were investigated by surveillance via FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, whoever else. But, and guess what they're going to find? They're going to find that you're clean and guilty or dirty, or they're going to find that you just clean or just find you just dirty. Malcolm, when it comes to Marcus Garvey, they seen the guy was maybe trying to do something, but they seen he had scamming tactics to do it. The smoking gun was the FILES Wheatley brochure. You can't get around this. It's the strongest piece of evidence that would have likely resulted in a conviction regardless of the jury's bias. Okay? The FILES Wheatley brochure was the strongest piece of evidence that would have likely resulted in a conviction regardless of the jury bias. It could have been 1923, 1823, 2023. He was going to be convicted and deported. He advertised for a ship that the BSL did not yet own. That's scamming. That's fraud. Garvey's team distributed circulars and brochures through the mail featuring a photo of a ship with FILES Wheatley painted on the hull. The BSL was in negotiations to buy a ship called the SS Orion, but they had not finished the purchase. They have not finished the purchase or paid the full amount. The FILES Wheatley didn't exist in their fleet. That's a fact. Garvey even admitted this in court. that the ship was not yet in the BSL's possession, but argued that he was raising money to buy it. Sound like Umar, okay? In mail fraud law, you got to understand, you cannot solicit investment by claiming you already own an asset that you are still trying to acquire. That's scamming. Using a modified photo to sell stock is a material misrepresentation, and that's the definition of fraud. Scamming, what we call it today. What about Benny Dancy? Okay, the specific charge that led to his conviction involved a man named Benny Dancy. This was an elderly FBA investor of the scam dream. The prosecution produced an empty envelope addressed to Benny Dancy that had a Black Star Line return address. This was something sent for him to solicit some sell stocks through mail. Dancy testified that he received stock solicitation materials in that envelope under mail fraud statutes. The government did not have to prove Garvey stole millions. They only had to prove he used the post office just once, to send a document containing a false claim to one person. And that was that damn brochure. The jury, check this out. They claimed that the jury was so racist and biased. That jury acquitted Garvey 4 out of 5 counts. Explain that. But they convicted him on the count involving the mail sent to Dancy because the paper trail was just undeniable. The envelope and the stock certificates, can't get around that. So look what he did. The drama doesn't stop there. Garvey made a catastrophic legal error by firing his experienced FBA foundational black attorney, Cornelius McDougald, and choosing to represent himself like a plebiscite babbler. You got no jurisdiction to me. I wasn't driving, I was traveling. All right, so that went wrong, as you can imagine, 3 different ways. It's called the Eagle Trap. Garvey treated the courtroom like a UNIA convention. Like he was just there to give a lecture and get donations from the court to buy into his stocks. That's how he was talking in there. He made long-winded, soaring speeches about African redemption, which was a great political move on the streets. I'm joking, the streets, but a terrible legal move. It gave the prosecution more opportunities to cross-examine him. They're like, you done? All right, well, like how I do when I'm debating these damn Pan-African coons. Then he was antagonizing the judge. Garvey frequently argued with Judge Julia Mack. He accused the judge of being biased because of the judge's membership in the NAACP, which Garvey viewed as rivals. This caused the judge to rule strictly against Garvey on procedural matters. All right. What about the Benny Dancy cross-examination? When Dancy, who was elderly and somewhat confused, took the stand, Garvey was so aggressive in his questioning that it made him look like a bully to the jury rather than an innocent victim of his own goofiness. Hello? Okay. So Garvey tried to frame it and spin it that he was a victim of a conspiracy. Okay. All right. Well, there is something called overwhelming evidence, Garvey. Okay. So even if the jury was 100% unfair, they seen you as, you know, a member of the rival, UNIA, rival to the NAACP, that does not omit the facts. Okay, family, he self snitched. A lot of the evidence was in his BSL own ledgers. Garvey continued to sell stocks while the BSL was effectively bankrupt. Debate that. Rebut that. Give me a comeback for Garvey continuing to sell stock while the BSL was effectively bankrupt. That's a bad practice. That's disingenuous, and you're scamming. You're misleading Black Americans. You're garbage, man. Your company is bankrupt, and you're still selling stocks to vulnerable Black Americans. So much for all these businesses, right? That they claim lying about. Now, look what he admitted to. He admitted that the company had lost nearly $700,000, which you can imagine was a massive sum a massive sum, which you can imagine was a massive sum in 1922. Yet his newspapers continued to claim the company was, this is a quote, successful and growing. Is that scamming? In your papers, you're promoting your company as, oh my gosh, the best thing since sliced bread. But the books show that the company is a dud. It bombed. Okay. So how are we gonna get around that? These conspiracy theories. Um, what about the vaporware ships? What about the vaporware ships? He solicited funds for the SS Orion and the SS Ethiopia without having clear titles to either. He was selling stocks to Foundation Black American hardworking people to two ships, and he didn't own either one. Okay, so when that guy James Worthy, whatever his name was, the FBI agent, when he was in the books looking at stuff, this is what he was looking at. He could not believe it was a smoking gun every which way in the damn ship. Smoking guns everywhere. BSL accountants, Black American accountants, testified against Garvey that the books were in total disarray and money was being moved from the shipping company to pay the operating costs of the Negro World's newspaper, allegedly other businesses that he invested in behind the back of his investors. Family, that's called commingling of funds. Okay. That is illegal for a corporation to do. Cannot do that. So, people want to say, well, Garvey was a great spokesman. He was great at galvanizing people in military dress wear and all this shenanigan stuff. Great, great. That's good to know. But he was a scammer by business law standards. That's a fact. He sold a specific product. The product was repatriation and shipping. You hear all this stuff they talk about, his supporters today. He said that he could deliver this. He could repatriate Black Americans and this shipping coastal international garbage. Hogwash. Hogwash. He used the savings of hardworking Black Americans, foundational Black Americans, their community, to fund a business that was functionally a money pit. It just burned money. What happened at trial? What happened at trial? Let's talk about his trial. I ain't gonna lie. In New York, Harlem, wherever he was, he had to get the gab. He was a masterful orator. He was a masterful he was a masterful orator. His performance as his own lawyer allowed the prosecution to pin him down on specific financial facts. Remember, he represented himself. He fired Cornelius, foundational Black American lawyer, like the Johnny Cochran of his day. He fired him. He represented himself pro se, like one of those guys that be in court saying nobody got jurisdiction over him. And the prosecution loved that. When they cross-examined him, oh my God. During the trial, the prosecution presented the company's internal ledger and audits. This is Garvey's own books. Under questioning, Garvey had to admit that the Black Star Line had suffered a net loss of roughly 700,000 by 1922. That was still the period of the Red Summer. He agreed $700,000 went to nothing. This dude was a despite the loss, despite the loss, Garvey continued to print advertisements in the Negro World newspaper claiming the BSL was a glorious success. This is um a quote, family. This is a quote after knowingly, knowingly he lost $700,000 in his papers. He would say, "Oh my God, my business is a glorious success and a safe investment. You can invest in this. It's protected." Dr. Ruxpin, like I said, those stock certificates were worthless. Okay? Worthless. Again, family, to sell stock in a company you know is bankrupt while claiming it's profitable is the textbook definition of securities fraud, which makes him a scammer by our standards. What about the Files Wheatley fabrication? The government entered into evidence a BSL circular that featured a photo of a large ship with the name Files Wheatley, clearly visible on the side. Okay. Garvey admitted in court that the ship was actually the SS Orion. So he admitted, yeah, I finessed it. I made it something it wasn't. This wasn't my ship. It was the SS Orion, which was some old German ship that was supposed to be sold for like parts, whatever. But he bought it to sell. Okay. Sell the oceans. He admitted that it did not belong, it did not he admitted that it did not belong to the BSL, the Black Star Line. At the time the photo was sent out to investors. So he's saying when he sent that photo out, he knew damn sure he didn't own it. False representation, false advertisement equals scammer. So the name had been physically painted or touched up on the photo to deceive potential stock buyers into thinking the fleet was larger than it was. He made the thing, oh, you can't make this up. Auditors showed that money raised specifically for the Black Star Line, the shipping company, was being diverted to pay the rent and printing costs of the UNIA's newspaper and to pay salaries for the UNIA. I told you, literally robbing Peter to pay Paul. Corporations are legal entities separate from political organizations. So using stockholder money to pay political expenses without disclosure is a crime that would stick in any fair court, unfair court, white supremacists. black, honest, hardworking folks in the jury. Doesn't matter, dude. Got to get a guilty verdict. Okay. So let's talk about Garvey's decision to represent himself transformed the trial into a political theater, which ultimately hurt his legal defense. Okay. He accused Judge Julian Mack of being anti Negro and a member of the NAACP, leading to a hostile relationship with the bench. Garvey was so aggressive with the elderly witness that it alienated the jury, making Garvey look like a predator rather than a victim. He failed to object to damaging hearsay evidence and frequently opened the door for the prosecution to bring up his past business failures. My God. They're bringing up rumors. Oh, so and so said this about you. So and so said you scammed this out of him. He's just letting it go. He's acquiescing. Okay. Anyway, family. Garvey's legal receipts show a man who was so desperate to fund his vision, his scam of a black or African Negro nation, that he took unethical shortcuts with the life savings of FBA community, Black American community, while his intent was so called liberation. His methods were fraudulent, making his conviction legally sound, even if the investigation was politically motivated. There's no way around that. Okay? Now, while in Atlanta Federal Penitentiary in 1925, Marcus Garvey penned a famous message to the Negro of the world. Okay, oh boy, here we go, which served as his final accounting to the shareholders and followers of the UNIA and the Black Star Line BSL. His explanation from prison reveals a mix of visionary defiance and an admission of the practical failures that led to the company's collapse. Right? In a rare moment of reflection, Garvey admitted in his prison writings that he was too trusting of the man he put in charge of the BSL's technical operations. He conceded that his lack of maritime, whatever. All right, let's talk about the 1924 deportation orders and the diplomatic cables between Monrovia, which is Liberia, and Washington are the ultimate proof that the Liberian program was legally dead while Garvey was still collecting money for it. Scammer. Let's talk about Liberia. By the summer of 1924, the Liberian government had shifted from cautious to openly hostile, fearing that Garvey's movement would provoke a European invasion of their territory. Okay, so when the UNIA's technical team, the engineers and experts with quotations, meant to build the foundation for Black American settlers, when they arrived in Monrovia, Liberia, they were met with police instead of a welcome party. So nobody came to them with open arms. How you doing, brother? Welcome to the motherland. They were met with this. And when they went to run from the law, they heard this.
Why are you running? Why are you running?
Okay, so no. The deported team included high-level UNIA officials and engineers like William Strange, James O'Malley, and Rupert Christensen. Yeah, we're name dropping. The Liberian government issued a formal notice of expulsion, on August 15, 1924, with date dropping as well. Okay, so the official paper stated that the UNIA's presence was undesirable. The official paper stated that the UNIA's presence was undesirable and that they were enemies of the state. Liberia looked at the UNIA as ops, ops, born ops, sworn ops. The enemies of the state was the exact quote, because their goal was to overthrow the existing Liberian leadership. Right. So now watch this. Look what was lost when they were deported. Over $50,000 worth of construction machinery that was paid for by donors. Right, for this dream. When they were deported, when they were arrested and deported out of Monrovia, Liberia, their equipment was seized. It was seized, I'm thinking, so they don't try again. Okay. So anyway, uh that was the smoking gun. There was a document. Check out this. There was a document where the Liberian government explicitly tells the United States that Garvey is a fraud. There's a smoking gun letter where the Liberian government concluded that Marcus Garvey was a scammer who does not have their permission to bring anyone to Liberia. All right? Nobody. By August 1924, the Liberian government had treated the UNIA like a foreign invader. They deported the engineers, stole the $50,000 in equipment that Foundation Black Americans worked so hard to pay for with their stock sales, um, and they gave all that up to a Firestone Rubber Company. But guess what? When all of that was going on, when the equipment was seized, when the president said no, don't send him by over here, he's a scammer. With all that being known, that this was a nothing burger, Liberia was a nothing burger. You think Garvey shut down and fled back to Jamaica or London? Nope. He kept the funding going. He kept the fundraising going. He kept the sales of stocks going, saying we're going to go to Liberia. This wasn't a misunderstanding as his cult leaders would like to reframe it as. It was a leader knowingly selling a dream that had already sailed away. Okay? We got to stop romanticizing the movement, the UNIA movement, the Marcus Garvey movement, and start looking at the settlement. The dude was a scammer. I proved that in all phases of this expose. Peace, family. Love you guys. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope this was edifying. You dig.